Charlie Macklin, and in today's video we're going to be going over Alchemy and Chemistry Part 8. In this part we're going to quickly recap where we left off, and we're going to discuss a new concept that I've introduced, and it's called casting a circle in alchemy. Now before we get into answering those questions, let's get a quick recap on where we left off. We left off with a pyrotechnic mixture consisting of saltpeter and sugar, and I put a little cinnamon in there for odor. Now this Van Halen relic, it's not here just to show you that this came from the Stone Age, but rather as a reminder of the three colors of alchemy: black, white, and red. Black being the destructive phase, burning or decomposition. White being the purification phase, where the chemicals are extracted and exalted, and then red being the conjoinment phase, the blending of chemicals, the alchemical wedding, as it is described. Well, in pyrotechnics, you're starting off a little later on down the road. You're starting off in the white phase, where the substances are usually store-bought. They're already purified for you. Then you're moving to conjoin them in the red phase. When you burn them, it's a whole nother phase. I guess you could call it orange, I suppose. It would represent the alchemical honeymoon, if you will, where the chemicals react. And then from that honeymoon, you have daughter and son products. The chemicals make new substances, and they have to make their way back to nature. And we want to make sure all that is done safely, where nothing is harmed. So the key purpose of casting a circle now, this is coming to the concept of intention, the concept of preventing harm, protecting the innocent, and to be the cause of no unnecessary pain. And in the Spagurics book, which I've read most of, it's a good book, circle is said to represent prima materia, that which is the starting point of your materials. So, in my thinking, though, circle represents spirit or thought, and this is very similarly linked to your magic traditions and casting a circle in Wicca and other magic traditions. Well, in that case, the whole point of a circle is to protect you from evil spirits. Similarly, we are making a circle in alchemy to protect ourselves from the physical causation of things that could cause you harm with chemistry. It could also be linked to some spiritual ritual, I suppose, but the primary intention is to get your mind engaged in a way that includes not just the different experiments you want to run, but also a safe way to do it, and a way to do it that doesn't hurt plants or animals or cause excessive harm. So with that being said, let's get a little further into this alchemical testing chart. As you can see here, there are 7 points in this circle that we're going to cast. Now the first 6 deal with quality. Now the 7th, it deals with the quantity. And as you see here, we have stones, each representing the points in the circle that we'll construct later physically. Each one has a symbolic reference to help you recall what it is that you're doing. The 7th is quantity, and you need to know what a safe quantity is of the substance, in this case 50 grams, but 50 grams of another substance might kill you, so quantity is definitely something to consider. Let's look at these senses a little more closely. Okay, these senses are numbered in a particular order, from far to near. In other words, you can see a Milky Way galaxy. Your vision is the farthest sense that you can perceive, but you can't hear it. Now you could hear a train or a gunshot from several miles away, but you probably can't smell it. But if you're within 100 feet, you could smell things, Now and then you're closer. As you get to your body, you go to the sense of touch. And the very closest is taste, where now you're mixing with the chemical itself. And then you'll come to the thought phase, which is very intimate to each individual human. And this is where I come up with the idea of a circle representing spirit. In other traditions, a circle might represent ignorance. In the Indian traditions, when I say Indian, I mean the Eastern metaphysical traditions, a circle can represent ignorance. Well, ignorance isn't always bad if it's a tool you use not to be uneducated, but to purposely ignore that which is dragging you down. It may be to your benefit to have certain ignorance applied, but we generally want to avoid ignorance. So, the seventh point would be quantity, and this gets adjusted as needed for safety. Now, let's look a little more at how this testing would progress here. If you have a sense, you will also have a phenomenon associated with that sense. For example, for vision, it would be light. For hearing, it would be sound or mechanical vibration. For wind, it would be for smell, it would be wind. That's the air plus the substance. For touch, it would be pressure, temperature, or friction. Quite a lot in that realm. Taste is molecular contact. It's now you're becoming part of the chemical. 6 is going to be your sixth sense. This is unseen things. This is spiritual forces, which I combine with magnetism and gravity and electromagnetics because unseen is unseen. If you can't see the force, you don't really know all that much about it. So why not include it in the unknown and learn about it that way? So spirit and thought, this is going to be very linked with morality and intention. And that's a very important part of alchemy that is left out of modern chemistry. If you look at modern chemists, they're going to get a corporate job and there's no telling whether they make a substance that harms or helps. It's all about money. The same for an engineer making various rockets or weaponry. Is it going to help mankind or are we going to use it for harm? So this comes into the intention. It's really a teaching that's left out of chemistry and left out of engineering. It shouldn't be left out, I don't think, because you need a sense of morality with your proceedings. So anyway, now there's going to be the most common mediums of each state. For light, I chose the symbol for spirit or ether, because that's what light can travel through. For sound, all the symbols of matter, the different states of matter. For smell, it's most closely related with wind. For touch, it's going to be most closely related with, well, pretty much everything you can feel by touch in some way. And taste is going to be associated with water, because we're 70-80% water. And intention goes to thought. That's the sort of medium. It's really just, that's the symbol for Mercury, but it's really just your brain would be the sort of medium in which number 6, the thought category, occurs in. And then if you say, okay, well, how am I going to test these things? Well, if you're going to test the phenomenon, you would expose the substance to light and then test for what it does. Does it create heat, sound? Does it react? Can it be used as a fiber optic? Does it produce electricity? All these things. And you could similarly test each of the phenomenon on the substance. You could expose the substance to vibration or sound. For air, you could expose the substance to other gases and see if there's reactions or odor absorptions. For touch, you've got some very important things to consider. Exposure to impact, friction, heat, fire, all that stuff. You can check for pH, especially when you get into the water category. Now this is the category of taste and exposure to liquids. Reactions, that's where the symbol for pharmaceutical comes from, Rx. It means there's been a reaction. The pH of the substance, all very important. For spirit, you really can't test spirit's phenomenon. You can only test what it does to other things. In other words, you can't see light. Light illuminates other things, and then you see what it illuminated. it's kind of a catch-22. Same for magnetism. You can't see magnetism, but you can see its effect. So that's how you have to test the spiritual or the unseen realm. It's a little bit trickier. Now the other sense here is the other test is the testing of senses. If you can see it, can it see you? Another testing of the sense would be the exposure to voice, language, or communication. Is there any way that the substance you're testing can somehow affect that? Smells would go with memory, mood, or instinct. Touch would be any of these things of heat, texture, and topical medicines. How does it make you feel? Is it good? Is it bad? That sort of thing. Now when you get to taste, you're really in something that's a whole nother category. Consumption and pharmacopoeia and shamanism. So that opens a whole new testing section, just that one spot there. And when you're down in this corner here, where you're at the crossroads of spirit and testing of the senses, you get into some kind of gray areas, or rather hard to see areas. What's internal, what's external, the mindset, the imagination, how does it affect the outside world, prayers, morality, all of that lives in this region on this chart. So it's a little out there. But I would like to point out that a lot of New Age religions will focus on the internal God within each one of us. And while that's true, you can't neglect the external God, because to do so would be to neglect your neighbor. Because if you're God, then they're God too. And see, this is the area of internal spirituality versus external spirituality, and the effect that that sort of thinking will have on a culture. Anyway, that's a little bit of a tangent. But those are all things to consider when you may invent something that gets used in war or to hurt people for money. That's not a good thing. So you have to think about these things when you're testing these substances. So, with all that in mind, each one of those senses has to be checked for safety. And then you'll know how much quantity to use on your 7th point. You got to consider, is the smell of it going to be, am I going to be downwind of the smell and it's going to hurt my nostril, it's going to poison me or something? Is it poisonous? Does it get in the water and hurt the fish? What's the safe distance from heat or flashes of light? Do I need to wear safety goggles? That's that whole thing. You have to take each one of these senses and then do a safety check on each and every one before you even really go too far with testing a substance. It may seem like overkill, but I think it's a good idea. So, that's pretty long-winded. Let's go ahead and do some of the physical testing, and we'll pick up the video in just a moment. Okay, let's get on with the physical testing of this substance. Here we've set up the 7-point alchemical circle. It's really a hexagonal pattern, which I found very easy to produce in nature with a single tool. That tool being a stick. Now, it's very important that you have a staff of some kind. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but you need that distance for safety when you go to ignite a substance. So if there's anything you learn from this video, it's definitely use a staff or a wand or something to give you distance between yourself and the substance. Now, why a hexagonal pattern? Well, coincidentally, it's the same pattern as a benzene ring, which is very big in organic chemistry. But it's also just a simple pattern to set up. The stick length is going to equal the radius from the 7th point, which is the center, also to any of the other points. So you can just swing it along, you see. Same distance from 1 as it is to 1 to 6, or to the central point 7. You just use one distance to make all 6 points, swinging it from the central point, and you can get your rough circle. So when it comes to using this circle, you're going to ignite it. I've got a piece of incense here, and we'll arrange that in a minute. And when you go to test it, you don't stand inside the circle when you test it, nor does any viewers, nor do any viewers or anything else. You stay outside of the entire circle, and you certainly don't stand above it when you ignite it. That's why we have a staff to give you distance from the object, and that's the safe way to do it. Okay, here I have the punk stick. You could use incense. Heck, you could use incense and duct tape and a broomstick. Anything is better than sticking a match in there the way most people that do pyrotechnics tend to do. So here we go. Let's see how this bad boy burns. And the wind, see, the wind is coming right at me. So maybe I want to be on the other side of this when I ignite it so I don't get smoke all over myself. And of course I'm going to stay outside the circle that I made. Here we go. Nice white cloud of smoke there. You can see that's pretty aggressive. You wouldn't want your hand in that. Now when we look in here, we see all this unburnt residue. This is called, these are called pearls, and most of that is going to consist of potassium nitrate. So we can go back to our lab, break out the pieces here, and weigh them and figure out through trial and error what would make the best recipe that burns most completely. So stay tuned for the next video. We'll do more alchemy soon. Thank you.